All right, good morning, everyone. There we are. Welcome to the March Government Affairs and Economic Development meeting. It's great to see everyone here in the room and those on Zoom. I have, looks like my double coach there, Glenn Morris, who's on in two different capacities on Zoom this morning. So welcome, Glenn. Today we have Lauren Drago and Aaron Clausen from the city's planning department, who are going to talk about the new proposed zoning ordinance. I know the links went out for those, we have a limited amount of time, so it's like last month trying to pack everything into a short amount of time. If you want to see a more broken down version of what's being proposed, and when you have the time to absorb it all, you can go to landincommon.com, and you can see all the slides. It's actually a like a YouTube presentation done by Lauren and Aaron as well. So Lauren and Aaron, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So why don't we just launch in? This is a fairly long presentation, and I want to make sure we both want to make sure that you have a chance to ask questions and make comments. But as Rick pointed out, we have put out a draft zoning amendment that is a complete rewrite of the zoning code, following on completion of Vision Lynn comprehensive master plan. So I'll get into a little bit more details in terms of process at the end, but just the highlight, I think, is that this is going to be out for public comment until March 23rd. On that Lynn Common webpage, there's an opportunity to provide formal comments. If you've got questions, comments, we're also happy to engage and talk about specifics. If you have very detailed questions, happy to get into it, because it is a rather large amendment. But for today, I want to give you sort of the larger sort of overarching thinking that's underlying this change. As why rewrite zoning? I think really simply, we haven't found any evidence that the entire code was rewritten comprehensively ever since it was first adopted in the 20s. And then the second major reason is we went through this effort with the community starting almost 3 years ago to complete a comprehensive master plan, which lays out the vision for the community out 25 to 30 years. And it really leaned into this idea of establishing a land use and urban form outcome based on that vision. And so zoning is a community's most powerful tool to regulate and shape development in that community. So logically, the next step is to take and make sure your zoning code is lined up with those objectives of the master plan. That's what I basically just said. I will say, another key objective of this is to really make the code more accessible. If anybody in this room has ever tried to read our zoning code, it is a challenge, admittedly. It's a bit of a choose your own adventure. You're going back and forth to different pages, trying to understand how the different footnotes align. And it really shouldn't be that way. A zoning code, although it is a complex document, needs to be accessible by the community. All the way from a developer, land use lawyer, down to a homeowner who's just trying to add a deck, make it accessible to the broader community. So to complete this process, we've hired Community Scale, which is a consulting firm working in Massachusetts. Particularly, they're focused on zoning rewrites, funded through the Housing and Livable Communities Housing Choice Program. And underlying this work is we've put together a working group to help shape that work and really try to bring in the expertise of both many different city departments, whether it's Inspectional Services Department, EDIC, LHAN, as well as members of City Council, Planning Board, Zoning Board, who actually have to work with this thing. We've got many years of experience. We want to bring that in. It is a data-driven approach. I will say the engagement, the community engagement is going to be a little bit different, or is different than Vision Lynn. Vision Lynn was a very aggressive engagement process. We try to use many different tactics to help the community tell us what the vision should be for the city. We really relied on that engagement, but there was opportunity to for the community to sort of respond to our objectives through a survey, Community Scale conducted a number of interviews with stakeholders, key stakeholders that really, again, use the document, land use lawyers, developers, et cetera. And then they prepared an audit looking at the zoning code from a sort of data perspective, like what does it elicit? All of those, I should say, the survey and the audit, and I believe the audit also lists some high level sort of outcomes from those interviews are available in the Lynn Commons. So if you want to get into the data, it's there to look at. I said this again. I want to make sure we have time for comments. So again, jumping back, this part is sort of harkening back to Vision Land briefly, just because this is the driving document for the zoning change that we're proposing. And some of the big land use and development objectives that the community talked a lot about was we still need to provide more housing options. But we also need to be mindful about access to jobs and creating more job opportunities in the community, attracting and building more businesses to help provide job access, but also improve our tax base. And then we also want to make sure that the development is maximizing community benefits. So we're trying to realign those zoning codes to those objectives. And please, if you have a question, stop me at any time. This is not intended to be super formal. In Vision, then we laid out principles for growth. So we're really trying to help activity nodes prosper and evolve. So we're right in our key one downtown is clearly an activity node, a lot of housing, commercial activity, institutional activity going on here. But we also have smaller neighborhoods that are mixed use and have, neighborhood businesses. We want to focus on supporting them as opportunities for growth, link those activity nodes with better transportation infrastructure so that we're mitigating the impacts of that growth. Transportation and traffic is generally the number one thing we deal with from that perspective. And then again, preserving an industrial and commercial land. What we saw in our analysis in Vision Lynn was that something like 90% of our tax levy is residential. And that is too high for a city like ours. If you looked at a lot of the peer communities like Chelsea, Everett, Lowell, Lawrence, they have a higher proportion of their tax levies commercial and industrial. And so that means our housing land use is shouldering the brunt of the tax, the levy. It also sort of shows, and we have more data at Vision Lynn, that a lot of Lynners have to commute out of the city for the jobs because they're not necessarily finding opportunities in the city. That's also contributing to some of the traffic problems we're dealing with. So we're trying to rebalance that dynamic with the zoning code. We spent a fair amount of time establishing place types, and I'll just say that the value from the zoning perspective is those place types easily folded to zoning districts. So we're really again relying on this to inform how our districts lay out across the city. And then also in Vision, then we laid out a degree of change. So we have areas within the city that we want to enhance. Again, downtown is an enhanced district. This is an area that we like to scale. We like the sort of the different land use mix here. We just want to support that and grow it with infill development that is consistent with this character of downtown. So we want to enhance this district. Then we have transformed districts where, like the waterfront, Gearworks, where we're saying we're going into this intentionally to change the shape and character of that place. The waterfront's generally a post-industrial environment. Auto-oriented commercial uses, we're looking to intentionally flip that to make it more of a mixed use and creating what, we haven't really termed this yet, but like an innovation district where we're creating jobs. So that's the transformation we're trying to make happen. And then everywhere else in the city where it's white, that's what we're calling the maintained district. That doesn't mean nothing happens in these areas. We still want to support and make those places better. But if there's any development, it's going to be looking like everything around it. And most of these areas are residential in character. They're mostly what we call R districts, residential zoning districts. I think we hit this. One of the data points from the audit that Community Scale noted for us is that over an 8-year period, we had over 200, pushing 300 variances. So a variance is, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the board who can grant the variance. And essentially what they're doing is they're allowing a property owner or developer to do something that is against the zoning requirements, whether it's a use variance, meaning it's a residential zoning district and they want to open a small business that requires a use variance. Or they need to build a building, but they're sort of encroaching in the side yard, or it's a small lot. That's a variance. This is not atypical for communities like ours, and particularly Massachusetts, but I will say what it does indicate is there's a mismatch with our zoning requirements, both use, but primarily dimensional, because a lot of these are dimensional variances that are being issued. So we're trying to right size our zoning requirements so that there's fewer variances that creates a more predictable environment for developers and property owners, but also for residents in an area or businesses. You should know, or you have a better sense of what's going to happen in your neighborhood, because here's the zoning code, and here's what's going to happen. We're going to reduce the number of variances that are issued. So that's a key objective of this. And what we found across the city, and this is, I think, a big reason we have so many dimensional variances, is something like 9 out of 10 parcels in the city in residential zone districts are non-conforming, meaning they don't meet our zoning code now. They're an undersized lot, the building's too close to the property boundary, so odds are your home doesn't comply with zoning now. And that's a problem, and that can be a challenge if you just want to add a deck. That can mean you've got to go through a process with the zoning board of appeals to get approved, and that can cost between $3,000 and $5,000 just to get the approval. That's going to cost less. So we're trying to clarify and simplify processes for both homeowners as well as developers. I gotta get that. Yeah. So supporting high quality projects is another key objective of this. We talked a lot about predictability and understandable code. We're trying to strengthen our site plan review process. Right now, it is, and is as proposed, it's a by right review, meaning project goes through the site plan review process. It is either approved or approved with stipulations. But the way our language in our code right now is it's hard for us to enforce these conditions.
Am I able to put your email down here?
The site
And
plan
it also says that I need
we can make this a little bit better.
my
if we
transcript to be emailed to them no later than
increase
March.
traffic in this way.
So
Okay.
what I asked.
Here or do this.
I can send the transcript.
Okay.
Yeah, can you send me like a link or something?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can send you the.
Everybody
Yeah,
mute
okay.
themselves, please, or can we mute them all?
It just says like I have to put your name.
Where's the summer program?
Something.
Yeah.
It just says I need to put your.
First, there you
Thank you.
So we're trying to create a little bit more leverage in the site plan review process to shape development projects. It's still gonna be by right, so someone coming in through this process knows they're gonna be approved, but there may be some changes that the site plan review committee is gonna be asking for that. We're also looking to improve the transparency right now. Notice doesn't really happen in the community when the site plan review committee meets. They meet at 10 a.m. In City Hall. It's still not going to be a public hearing, but we want to make information available. So we'll notice when a meeting's happening. People have the opportunities to go and see what's going on. So we're trying to create a little bit more transparency in that process moving forward as well.
Was there anything else?
I think that's it.
Aaron, on that transparency, so at a house in Florida, there was a project being done.
Yeah.
I got a postcard in the mail, the entire neighborhood
Yeah.
got a postcard with a description and a gray circle over that property, what they're proposing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, we would basically, what we're proposing is not quite that detailed.
Okay,
But is more consistent with what a lot of communities are doing in Massachusetts for site plan review. So the abutter to the property and the abutter to the abutter to the property is gonna get notice within, I think it's like 300 feet. And that a meeting's happening, you're gonna have to go to the webpage to find the project information. But at least you know what's going on,
Right.
and you know where to go to find information. So
I
that's
just thought it was pretty creative, and
Yeah.
I wasn't that close to it, I was, so.
Yeah,
You know,
truthfully, some other states are a bit more rabid. It sounds negative, but I'm not negative about it, but they're a little bit more intense
yeah,
about their notification. And we'll work to find ways so that, there's notice through that abutter notice will, it'll be advertised and that sort of thing, through the item. But also just making it available on the webpage, so you don't have to go to City Hall to look at it. You can just click on it, you can click on a link and you can pull up the documents and you can see what the site plan review committee is seeing. So, so it's, hopefully ways to help people understand what's happening. So we're also preserving what we believe is working. We're not changing inclusionary zoning with this change at the moment. Not changing parking requirements across the board. The city council is going to continue to be the special commitment. Our zoning districts themselves are going to be simplified, but they're very consistent with what's going on now. So we have a number of residential districts from single family to multifamily. We've got mixed use business districts from downtown to neighborhood business and industrial. We're gonna retain that dynamic. That continuum is very similar. So it's gonna look very similar, but it's gonna be aligned with Vision Lynn a little bit more and these sort of growth districts.
Now, Aaron, will this still be R1 districts?
Yeah.
That will stay single family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's gonna be some more, we'll talk about it in just a moment. There's gonna be an increase in the R1 district places.
Are there any other questions before we dive into like the actual map? This is probably a good moment to just check in. All right.
Quick question on the care plan. It's still GE property, right?
No, that's owned by a developer.
Oh.
Yeah, Gear Plant's not owned by GE. They purchased it 26, other people would probably know that,
Quite a while
2016.
Oh, was that Charlie's? No,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So folks in the hallway want to come inside?
Yeah, there's plenty of room.
We have some other seats.
You can come sit next to me, John.
No.
Right here.
So,
Lisa?
please come in if you can. Just again to note, the zoning code or the map is on the webpage. And then Lauren put together this little tool. It's an interactive map where it has a slider. You can kind of slide back and forth to see what's existing and what's proposed, and you can really zoom in on properties. It's gonna be difficult in this venue to really get into some details, but just to plug that, it's a great way to see what we're proposing. But we'll try to hit the highlights here. So starting with residential districts, I mentioned currently there's 5. We're proposing to sort of consolidate that to 4. Primary reason is our current R4 and R5, which are high-rise multifamily, are essentially the same. The dimensional requirements are, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. So that, I'm not sure why we would want to keep that differentiation. So R4 is sort of an agglomeration of those two. And just as you read in the table there, P means it's permitted. That means that use is allowed in that district by right. You need to meet dimensional requirements, but you can do it. You can do that. SP is a special permit. That means in that case, the city council needs to issue a special permit. It's a discretionary review. The city council can say no. If it doesn't meet with the character of the neighborhood or the impacts outweigh the benefits, they can say no for that kind of a project. And then we talked earlier about right sizing the zoning code or the lot requirements in the R districts. And so what you're looking at here is a table of the 4 residential zoning districts that we're proposing that compares the current minimum lot area with the proposed as well as frontage. And so minimum lot area, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. It's the lot size. How big is it square footage wise? The frontage is the length of your property along the street that it's adjacent to. So corner to corner. And what the analysis from the audit found is that the median lot size that's existing in the city right now in R1 is just under 6,000 square feet. So what we're proposing is we're going to reduce the lot size to 6,000, so more lots are in compliance. Our zoning looks and is aligned with what is in existence on the ground. And the same goes for the frontage, so from 75 to 50 feet. And you can see that we're doing the kind of the same thing as you move to the right to the more multifamily districts. R2, the character of that is it's either single family or 2 family. That's generally what's allowed by right. And then as you get into R3 and 4, it's multifamilies. It's just the density and scale that's allowed by. Lot to take in here. Left map is showing you where the art districts are. And then on the right are the dimensional requirements, and we've highlighted in the dash purple there where there are key changes. So we talked about the frontage and the lot size. We're adding some other dimensional requirements. So in the residential districts, we want to limit impervious lot coverage. We want to make sure that there's landscape and vegetation in our residential neighborhoods as a sort of a quality of life outcome. So we're adding that as a requirement. Historically, density in our zoning code has been dictated by building height only and setbacks. We're adding this lot area per dwelling unit requirement to add an additional requirement. So in a case where, you can build to the height limit, and you have a large property, we're trying to make sure it's not too intense for that neighborhood. So these lot area per dwelling unit sort of brings down the number of units in neighborhoods where, again, it's not so intense. This is just a graphic that shows what the different requirements mean. So you've got the front setback, you've got side setback, rear setback. I won't go into this except to know that it's on the webpage. If you really, as you're looking at the dimensional table, this will be a helpful reference point if you're not familiar with using zoning code. So I talked a little bit earlier about some changes in terms of the single family zoning districts. And again, in the audit, what community scale found is in West Lynn, these areas that are blue, much of those properties are zoned R2. So they allow a two-family home on those properties. But for the most part, what we found is that there are single-family homes. And so what we're proposing actually is to take these properties and rezone them from R2 to R1. So they're being downzoned. On the other side of the city in East Lynn, it's a little bit different dynamic. Much of East Lynn is zoned R1 right now, single family, but the character of that neighborhood is predominantly 2, 3, sometimes 4 unit multifamilies. So what we're proposing is to upzone some of those so that you could do 2 or 3 unit mixed use. And it varies. Sometimes we're upzoning to R2, sometimes it's R3. But generally what we're trying to achieve there is to allow smaller scale, smaller multifamily infill in those neighborhoods that, again, look like the surrounding neighborhood. We asked community scale to do a quick analysis of what that meant in terms of new housing units. And generally what that means is that this change would produce just under 400 less housing units for the city. So it's, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of it's a very equal change.
That's future housing.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's more about capacity. It's not like.
You're not telling two families in the blue districts, they have to.
Absolutely right.
No, that's, yeah, okay.
That's right. So yeah, and that's a key feature of zoning generally. If you're a non-conforming structure, or if we make somebody non-conforming because we take an R2 district, 2 family, and we zone it R1, they get to continue in perpetuity as a non-conforming user structure. No problem.
In the same way that 94% of our residential parcels were already non-conforming anyway.
Yeah. I should just jump back really briefly there. The other benefit of this change is you'll see, as we're sort of upzoning East Lynn, the other sort of benefit or objective we're achieving here is you can see most of those properties are closer to transit facilities, whether it's commuter rail, those are the purple stops. And then there's also bus services we don't have on this map, but it's a little bit closer to transit options too, so we can accommodate that infill a little bit better. This is a quick example of what this means. So currently, here's a property on Spencer Street, corner Spencer and Water Hill. This is an R4 district. You can't build on this property right now because there's the minimum requirement for development is 15,000 square feet lot. So you would need a variance to build on this. Although you can see the character of the neighborhood around it is allow that. So our zoning change would allow this kind of infill development by right, where you could build a 3-family that is roughly 2.5, 3 stories tall, which again is in character of the surrounding neighborhood. So it's opening up opportunities for smaller infill projects. There was another one around the corner of Cottage Street where developers were able to find over 15,000 square feet, and But the way our zoning works is it allowed a 5-story building with something like, I'm gonna forget now, it's like 26 or 27 units in a neighborhood that looks more like this. We're just trying to rebalance that and allow smaller infill, but make sure we're controlling larger multifamily these residential neighborhoods. On the other end of the spectrum, 21 High Street, this is in the downtown mixed use district. You can build up to 10 stories by right in this district right now. And again, you can kind of see in the neighborhood around it, it's 3-4 stories. There's some pretty big multifamily buildings there. We're proposing to zone this, I think, R4. And so this test fit was put together, and you can see how it, you could allow, I think it's 4 dwelling units with on-site parking. And again, that project looks like the neighborhood. It's fitting in there. Commercial districts, again, we have a range of mixed use and a Riverworks TOD. So this is sort of combining a lot of the waterfront districts that we have now. I'm not going to go into the dimensional requirements, but what I'll say is, generally speaking, we're in the mixed use and the downtown mixed use district. Have very flexible dimensional standards. When you start moving into the B1, B2, which is neighborhood business, the dimensional requirements are a little bit more aligned with the residential neighborhoods that are surrounding. So you really see it downscale quite a bit. The key change here is we've created a new zoning district called R&D. And what we're trying to incent is investment in innovation, the innovation economy, science-based technology. So it could be life science, it could be clean tech, tough tech, whatever you want to call it. We're trying to make sure that we're allowing this in a number of different locations. And we've added a number of different use categories across the spectrum, from office, which is very innocuous, obviously, to heavy industry. And we've created a number of land use typologies that, as you move to the right here, you can see they're permitted. So office, medical, co-working, art and design, pretty much allowed anywhere by right in the commercial districts. But then you move to more research and lab, where there's a little bit more intense uses. You have life science, scientific research. Again, pretty flexible, allowing that in most places. You need a special permit in a B1, which is the neighborhood commercial districts, and so on as we move across that continuum. And we really drew on the South Harbor plan. This came again out of Vision Lynn, that this is the transformed district. Key thing is here is you're seeing the land use objectives that were laid out in this plan. The dark purple is again more R&D, sort of advanced manufacturing kind of uses. The light purple is smaller industry, so fabrication, that sort of thing, small entrepreneurial businesses that work in that space. And then as you radiate north and south, you see the orange, which is a mixed use that has more of a residential component to that. The difference here is right now under zoning, the entire waterfront really is a mixed use residential zoning district. It incents residential primarily. What we're trying to do is flip that in areas where the existing or legacy uses are very industrial in character, the wastewater utility, the transfer station, national grid. They are what they are. And so we're going to build around that more industrial R&D, where residential may not be a great fit. They're then sort of balancing that land use mix that we've talked about earlier and create jobs.
I'd also point out too, part of the SHIT plan was talking about making the Riverworks station a publicly accessible train station instead of the flag stop that it is today. We're continuing work on moving that forward. And then, did you want to talk about the street grid as well too?
Sure. So so we wanted to lay out the land use strategy for redevelopment of the waterfront, but the other key pieces, we recognized that there was a need for a better street network on the waterfront. Right now, everything comes and goes from the Linway, which is problematic. So for us to support this kind of development and the scale of development we want to see on the waterfront, we're proposing to create a complete street network. So Navy Road, reestablishing that, apparently that existed at one time. This is a road that runs along, or did run along the commuter rail. And then taking Harding and Hanson Street, where right now they sort of dead end at Linway, and bringing them across to the Gear Works, and then Circle Ave, running parallel to the Linway, connecting up to Marine Boulevard and then Hanson Street. Again, so that whereas now we have one road that you can get north and south, we'll have three. And so there's gonna be multiple ways to get to and from the waterfront that will mitigate traffic impacts. But it also will help provide the transportation infrastructure for the commercial users. So Circle Lab becomes essentially the main way for R&D and industry for the commercial truck traffic that is needed to support those businesses. They're pulled off of the Linway, and really access comes through Circle Lab. And as a Linner, now you can go to the waterfront, the harbor park that we're building, you won't have to go to the Linway. You can actually just drive, commercial street and to Circle Ave, or Navy Road. You have multiple ways to get there. So that's sort of what we're trying to achieve that. And so the zoning code, there are certain stretches of the street network. Circle Ave is the key one. We, as a private developer looks to redevelop those properties, we're looking for them to provide those rights of way, just like in their subdivision, that gets approved now.
What does pedestrian crossing across the Linway look like in that, when Harding and the other streets go over, how? Is it stop just the regular walk, don't walk, or are you gonna build a flyover or whatever?
Oh, it'd probably be on at grade, it'd be the grade, yeah. But it would be a much improved, so like an intersection that would have much improved facilities.
Like what they did at Blossom.
Yeah, a little bit more like Blossom, and yeah. Absolutely.
Because a major issue down there is folks that walk across the streets from Walmart.
Now,
Heading back to
yeah,
East Boston and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Revere.
Yeah, mid-block pedestrian crossings is very much a big problem. And part of that is there's very few crossings. So you have to actually walk, generally, you have to walk a long way just to get to a crossing. So some of these connections are intended to provide a more granular sort of network so that people will still. I mean, you can see here between Commercial Street, which is that one, the arrow pushing up, and Harding, that's a pretty long distance to not be able to cross. And so we may need to find other ways to get there, but this will be a starting point.
There's a median there, though, there's not really anything you can do.
Yeah, you have to rebuild the roadway completely.
I get it.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah. But this is a long-term plan, and the idea is sort of make the most of developments as they happen, so.
So, just, would that add more lights to the Linway?
This plan does not.
Okay.
We just added the Blossom Street. Harding and Hanson do have lights. It would just extend the street across to Pier Works.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, when you talked about the T station, when we had, Charlie's, DOT secretary in, and that's what we said, because, hey,
Oh, yeah?
let's get this going, and she said, yeah, you come up with 26 million, you got it. And so I don't know how your talks are going with them.
Well, we won a federal grant for whatever that's worth at this
Okay.
point, for $550,000 to do a feasibility study and it's like sort of a schematic design, kind of look at it a little more closely. And we, the MBTA agreed to be really the lead on that. So we did the work of applying and then they did the work of actually contracting with the feds.
Okay,
We still need to understand if that is still able to move forward, but if not, I think we are committed to finding other ways to push it
And
forward.
there's different secretaries now from DOT to MBTA.
Absolutely.
In place now that I think might be a little more open.
I think you're right. That's a very fair statement. I mean, the current secretary and the general manager for MBTA are very focused on commuter rail. I mean, the general manager of the MBTA ran a commuter rail system in Long Island, and that's where his focus is. So,
And they even seem to be a little more open to land.
yes, yeah, I think they understand, like, it's hard to speak for somebody else, but the sense that we're getting is that they see the value of this. The relocating the station north, as we're proposing, opens up the chance to have access to that station from West Lynn. So if you're living, over Oak or whatever, Bennett, you could actually walk to the train station. So there's some benefits there that they see from a ridership perspective. So they were, as Lauren said, they were willing to take the lead on that study, and that study wasn't really another land use study. That was primarily around what's the rail infrastructure needed to add this full access station. I will say, it only works once we electrify the commuter rail. But we also that seems to be taking some the exponent. This is showing just the locations of the R&D and light industrial. And then just a quick one on open space. Primarily, this just shows where our current open spaces are. We don't really zone for open space, it's just really a reference point.
So the map is available online for people to look into. As Aaron said, there's a slider so you can look at before and after. There's an interactive version. You can look up your address or any other address. And there's the old school PDF version. Get this then. So essentially, as Aaron mentioned, we're in the public comment period of this right now. So we're trying to have conversations like this with anyone who's interested. We've had really good feedback from zoning code power users so far. People who are using this code all the time have given us some really useful questions and things. It's really, really helpful to get this now early in the process so that we can incorporate that into the next draft. So anything that you can do to help make sure people are paying attention to this is really appreciated. The goal is to have a revised draft in April that is in really good shape to start scheduling out for public hearings and conversations with the council. And we're hoping to have something that people are excited to adopt this spring.
Any questions?
I do have a question.
Hey, how are you doing?
How are you doing? In one of my other lives, I'm chairman of campus planning at St. Mary's. And one of the things we noticed right away is that this plan proposes to change the zoning of the St. Mary's property from central business district to R4 residential. And we understand that there, under 40A, there's a exemption for religious and nonprofit educational uses, so we'd be okay for use, but there is a site plan provision under 40A in those exempted uses for things like parking, setbacks, etc. We're going to be lobbying to keep it in the central business district, but I'd like your comments on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn, for that. We're gonna see if we can pull up the interactive map that we have online and just look at that in particular, because I believe it currently is zoned for R4.
No, it's zoned central business district.
Take a look.
At the time that we were developing the STEM building, we went to city council and Jimmy Moore represented St. Mary's and rezoned that property for central business district.
Okay, do you know when that happened?
It must be like, we could find out the exact date, but I'd say 6 to 8 years ago,
Okay.
something like that.
It's possible that that's an error in our data, Glenn, because when we looked at this, we have it as currently zoned R5, proposed R4, and then these parts for other parts of St. Mary's, the CBD and staying CBD. But maybe if you're able to follow up over email with more detail, we could look into
Right.
that. Maybe there's a data error we have in our map.
Perfect.
That's not where that parcel's we strip mall in a dental office.
Right.
Oh, am I on the wrong one?
No,
No, you're right, just around.
No, that's it.
Okay.
Part is like Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, yeah.
yeah. So that pretty much everything that's in the brown, at least on this map, is St. Mary's.
Mhm.
We'll definitely take a look at that, Glenn. I think there have been occasions, and this is part of the reason for the zoning amendment or the update, where district changes were made, but never included in the map, which is clearly problematic. So we'll take a
Right.
look at that for sure. But what I would recommend is as much detail as you could write. I don't want to put the work on you necessarily, but in that comment form on the linnencommon.com page, Partly just the straight up comment that you want to stay in the DMU, but the sort of the reason behind it, because you're right, I mean, St. Mary's is protected under the Dover Amendment, so you don't need to meet the use requirements. Generally, even dimensional requirements don't apply to schools and religious, yeah, I think you religious.
Actually, one of my other lives, I was chairman of the Urban Design Commission in Newton and a member of the Comprehensive Plan Commission. And we have extensive experience with the courts with site plan approval and reasonable conditions in quotes
Yeah.
on those uses, even though the use is exempt.
Yeah, well, BC is one of there's a landmark case.
Oh, yeah.
About height, and actually sort of established the fact that schools don't need to meet height limits. Because
And
BC had a particular cornice land that they liked.
right.
Yeah.
But there were parking requirements imposed on BC and on several churches in Newton. So anyways, I will get Jimmy Moore to get you the paperwork and make sure you have that.
That'd be great, thank you.
Any other questions? Changes to residential districts where you have like the minimum lot area is being reduced to kind of right zone, as you said. Does that affect the subdividability of the lots?
It can,
Yeah.
yeah, it can, so say it's in an R1 district now, and you have a 12,000 square foot lot, just simple math. You could now, under the zoning change, subdivide that and create 2 lots because it would be 6,000 square feet. Yeah, so there will be some opportunity for some infill residential development that comes out of that. But we don't expect it to be a huge number just because the availability of those parcels. You also have to meet frontage requirements too, so there's a couple of factors in there. It's sort of an equation and parking and all that, but generally speaking, yes.
Can I ask just a quick question, since you're the corner of State and Market, that's now, it's proposed to be a green space, you're gonna knock the building down and can become a park or something?
Seems like it's also an error.
You know what that is? That's the city-owned building. We definitely need to fix that.
Yeah,
Oh, the Century Bank. building.
Yeah.
that's why. Good eye, thank you.
Good catch.
That's why we
I was
need
hoping
you.
for green space, and wasn't
Exactly why we did this. That would have been rough.
You start hearing on the news about people that are gonna turn their garages into like
An Airbnb.
small homes,
That's
you know, like the in-laws are putting the little homes on these properties.
Yeah. So we already amended zoning to comply with the state's legislation in the Affordable Homes Act, or whatever it's called. Basically, what the state said is, we're mandating all communities will allow ADUs on residential zoning districts. We amended our zoning and more information here to give us a little bit more control on what that looks like. So the state, it's actually the state when they passed legislation compared an ADU to a school use. So it is actually protected under a Doberman, the protected use. We cannot disallow it as outlined in their regulations. They created some state regs around that. But what we can do is add some additional dimensional requirements to sort of make sure, again, make sure that these things aren't popping up out of character. So we created a tiered sort of setback requirement. If it's under 15 feet, it can be pretty close to the property boundary. It's similar to any other accessory structure, like a garage or what have you. If it's above 15 feet, you need to meet the setbacks of the primary building, so that, okay, it's a bigger volume, needs to be a little bit farther away from the parcel boundary. Preserve the character. So we already adopted that. We're not proposing any changes. With this change, I think what ISD is doing right now, I just talked to Chris Poole yesterday, they've had something like 70+ questions about ADU and what's allowed. Nobody's submitted an application yet, so we're just trying to see how it all shakes out.
Now, we still see some communities fighting back on the the transit-oriented development and I noticed in Revere, I watch the city council meetings on Zoom on Saturdays. And about a year and a half ago, somebody proposed a housing, an apartment building on North Shore Road, right by the Revere Beach Blue Line Station. And, you know, said it was transit-oriented development, no parking and all. And Revere's pretty much had it with large-scale residential development because it's just everywhere there. And so what the council did there was they said that if you're not gonna have parking, nobody can register a car there. And nobody at that address can get a resident parking sticker. They said, if you're saying oh, they're gonna go to the Revere Beach Blue Line Station, then they're not gonna have cars if they're gonna live there. And those buildings that just finished them up now, but they were able to.
That will be, so, that'll be interesting to follow. I think there's precedent and example where a project, that would be a condition of approval. We talked about conditions earlier. Where a multifamily like that didn't get a resident parking sticker, they were prevented from preventing their ability to register a vehicle. Seems a little tenuous, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
There's legally defensible.
Yeah. I mean, the developer may be fine with it, they just say, okay, whatever, you know.
Right, and then once
We'll
they
find
go on,
out.
they come.
Yeah, but what is the registration? You can't park it overnight.
Right.
Well, they get the garage, right? They park down the,
MBTA garage.
MBTA garage.
Pay for it.
Right, but that's,
Yeah.
you know, the developer doesn't care.
That's why the registration thing seems a bit,
Illegal.
Yeah.
because you could find a place.
There are many moves among several communities in areas with commercial and multifamily residential development to either downgrade or eliminate parking requirements. So it's the theory is that if you require the typical 1.5 to 2 cars per unit, for instance, or 3 cars per 100 square feet, 1,000 square feet, I'm sorry, that it just creates traffic and parking problems.
I'm sure we have where the Bagel Bit Deli used to be. That one looks like they're building some parking underneath it.
A lot of places are. Especially, you know, around the water, nobody's doing anything on the first floor anymore, other than power to
Oh, yeah, that's right.
For flooding, yeah.
They still are proposing to tear down the garage here on Market Street.
So the sort of the last we left of the T's, they recognize there's a value to preserving at least some of it. So essentially it's 2 garages with that steel structure in the middle. My sense is that the T has agreed to look at preserving the side of it at the very least, which I think is good. So it's like 360 parking spaces. That'll be a big impact. So the question is just how quickly can they move? They have about 19, I think it's $19 million in a bond bill that was allocated to the T to originally raise the entirety of it. So their next step was to do a feasibility study to understand what it would take and what it would cost to tear down one side and repair the other.
What part they're gonna tear down is the city planning on making more parking spaces, like grade level.
I don't know if they would be able to create more parking spaces, but I mean, in a sense, it would be more than now because you
Right.
essentially, I think, above like the second deck or the third deck, you parking at all. So that.
I don't mean more, I mean, when they tear down that structure, what they're gonna
Space.
do with that space.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
It would be a mixed use district. It would be a redevelopment. There'd be a redevelopment. Presumably there would be some parking. Yeah, the market, whether or not you require parking zone, the market will build some just because there needs to be some.
Is that for BTA property or city property?
MBTA. Yeah,
So we'd have to, somebody'd have to buy it from the developer.
they would probably put it out for bid. So, yeah.
And now, right now requires, retail use on the first floor for multifamilies. Does the city allow you to do parking instead of the first floor?
You could fit it in the back, so the way ours,
The
the
back,
way,
okay.
and we really did not talk about this, we're upgrading that commercial ground floor requirement a little bit. To create a little bit more shape about what it is. So I think we are requiring commercial to have something like 25 or 30 feet deep on the ground plane. So you could put parking behind it. Particularly in the MBTA garage. There are some, there's some blocks like Monroe, Oxford, the block between there is so narrow, you're probably not gonna get parking. But the garage, you can absolutely do both of those things, yeah.
Kind of off the subject, but is there anything new with the Central Square lot that Copio had?
I think we're just doing some testing of the site with VOCs. I think there's a back and forth with.
Oh, in the ground?
Yeah.
There was more people in there the last week than for months, so they could use the snow melting, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's old.
Yeah.
So two-part question, some of it you've heard before. Yeah, it's separating sort of the theory and the practice of the downtown. So requiring commercial on the first floor, moving forward with a lot of these developments. My question is, some of the ones that are already up and running, are those commercial pieces actually being used, or are they mostly empty?
Yeah.
What are you seeing? And that's the first part of the question. I'll start with that one.
Yeah, we haven't done a count of vacancy in the downtown, but we did walk the downtown last summer with this company called Graffito. They're sort of a commercial real estate consulting group out of Boston, and their bread and butter is working with developers and property owners that have mixed use buildings to activate the ground, because most of these developers, it's not their business. They build a building and they want to lease it out to residents, and the commercial space is sort of an afterthought. And the only reason they're doing it is because we require it. So they work with these types of developers to find a way to program the ground plane successfully. So we walked the downtown. First of all, their observation is that generally speaking, we don't have a lot of vacancy. We actually have a lot of our commercial spaces are pretty full. But what is happening is some of the new projects, when they're building the commercial space, they're not fitting it out. So what that requires is something like $40 to $50 a square foot of a capital investment before you actually lease out the space. And that is onerous for most small businesses. And so there are some developers who aren't making that investment. And so that's why that space stays vacant. Where the fit out has happened, they're leasing up. This project over here in Oxford Street at Willow that's got the rhino on the side, the developers actually built out the ground floor, and now they're leased up. They've got spaces in that area. Procopio did not do that. And so they've been waiting 5-6 years to find a tenant. No tenant's gonna pay $40 a fit out. It's not gonna happen. So what we're doing is a couple of things we're doing is we're providing a little more detail on what's required of the ground plane for commercial uses, so that we get actual quality spaces that could be leased out. But we're also then concentrating where we want to see those commercial uses. So you can kind of see on this map, there's the little blue line that sort of is the boundary on the street in the downtown mixed use district. Those are areas where we say, absolutely, you need to have commercial use. These are our major commercial streets. But some of these side streets, they're just not going to be, high trafficked areas. So Tremont, that was that become really blank. Tremont Street, that becomes Essex. We're not going to require ground floor commercial there. What this is doing is it's concentrating that requirement on our major commercial streets so that we get high quality retail. With Amazon and online buying, we thought malls were going to kill the downtown, right? In the 80s, they didn't. Looks like Amazon is the problem. But what we do, if you create an experience, if we can concentrate that activity in a few areas, we think it'll be more successful and to preserving its affordability. The other thing we're doing is we're allowing it by right, sort of a mixed use fabrication retail space. So I guess Ravenstone in a way is an example of that, where they make stuff on site and they sell most of it online, but they have a retail space. We want to allow that easily and support that downtown so that you could have a space where, I can't remember the number, maybe it was 50% is fabrication, you're making something, but the other half of it is retail. And so that's, you know, so that we're trying to expand the offerings for that kind of commercial retail use.
So the second one is the one that you've already heard, but I wanted to throw that to the room, and something that Brian and I have talked about, and you know, from TDI. So the first TDI that we had was all focused on, you know, building up the downtown, creating foot traffic for the businesses. You know, we've got a number of these rather large residential buildings, but like you said, it's Amazon that kills the downtown, right? So everyone, a lot of the businesses, Brian has mentioned this, many of the chamber members and just from the small business community in downtown being down here, is that we don't see any of that foot traffic. So all these residents are coming to Lynn, and I guess they're either door dashing everything or, you know, doing their entire life in the city of Boston, and then they just come here and they sleep. So I'm throwing it more out to the room because there's a lot of leaders in here is, how do we make inroads into, you know, the property managers that are there, or the leasing agents, so that we can encourage people to actually shop local? Because if we're, you know, one, you're increasing the tax base, which was part of the goal. The second piece of it was to create foot traffic for the downtown. We're not seeing any of that. So, people are interested in volunteering some time to go knock on doors, or they know someone there, much appreciated to pass those along. And I think that's something that definitely the chamber and we definitely talked a lot about it, and, you know, we're happy to knock on doors too I don't know if the planning board has some of the contacts, you know, at these buildings that we could utilize, especially moving forward. If there's gonna be new buildings too, how do we start from that ground level of like, how do we showcase the what we do have to offer in downtown, you know, to those new residents?
When that first TBI district happened, I talked to the fellow there, that Mass Dev, you know, had hired. And he said that it was all dependent on the ability to create and nurture, what he called destination businesses, to get people sort of jazzed up about the downtown district. And he was talking about what a struggle that was to get going. I think a lot of people just, there's a lot of repetitiveness in some of the storefronts. And I don't know that what we need to do is nurture those businesses and help them. Like one of the things in the TI district was signage. It improved the look of that, made the downtown, the Central Square district feel much more walkable. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what there were in the Flatiron building that's across the street from my pharmacy. There've been a number of businesses come and gone. They were all good. I ate at every one of them, and they were all great. I don't know why they didn't take off, but even the Monroe Street and the local high rises there, apparently nobody's going. I don't know. If they're door dashing McDonald's.
Right. Starbucks and everything else.
Yeah.
I remember going to the grand opening for Pint when they first took that space.
Yeah.
And I said to the owners, and I said, it's gonna be a grand slam once Caldwell opens up.
Right.
And it just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to be the only magnet is the restaurants.
Yeah.
And a lot of those, it's people even from outside Lynn that are coming down to Rossetti's and the Ox and, you know.
Well, and I'd add to that too, I think retail like Simmons and Ravenstone in particular are also playing a big role. I think we've been talking with our TDI fellow about Ravenstone in particular, because most of their sales are online. It's, you know, they're not making enough to do that beautiful store for just what people are walking in. But one thing that they had identified is, you know, people come on Saturday and they drive for 2 hours to buy gemstones at that store. I can't say I totally understand it, but like, it's been great for them. And then people come in and say, oh, I've never been to Lynn before. Like, what should I do now? And he says on a Sunday, I say, oh, go to the vintage market at the Prime building. It's super cool. And on Saturdays, he's like, oh, you can go to Simmons, you know? And so what you were saying about the destination is really, really crucial. We were just talking to the vintage market yesterday about like, would you guys be open to doing Saturdays too, if we know that there's some demand? So some of it is this sort of like talking and collaborating amongst business owners.
Chicken egg too. What
Yeah.
comes first, the demand or the opening?
Exactly, and then we're also doing a big investment on downtown wayfinding right now. That we're moving towards fabrication and installation of those signs, and I think that's gonna be really helpful too, so that if you come to Lynn for the first time and you have a good experience, you're gonna be more likely to come back, and that means being able to find the parking lot you were trying to find, knowing where you're going, knowing how to accidentally stumble on that hole in the wall restaurant that's amazing food, like, we can be doing more on our end to make sure people have good experiences. But I think the other part of what you're saying too is if we can bring more employers to the downtown as well, so that you're not just getting residential crowd coming home at night going to sleep, but also the daytime. And I know that's something that folks have been working on for a long time, but we feel like the zoning code is a piece to that. But I think there's probably a lot more of like using people's networks and putting ourselves in front of businesses that are trying to move or grow. And I think that's something that we'd be really open to feedback, specifically from the people in this room, from this committee, of how do we get more businesses and employers in downtown Lynn to support all of these priorities?
I think zoning doesn't solve everything, but
Exactly.
zoning is an important base. I love the fact that you're requiring the storefronts or the building fronts pretty much at the property line on Market Street. When I was a kid, that's where the fronts of the buildings were, and it was much more dynamic. And you see that generally. We were the architects for the Blue Ox, and took that from a rather seedy bar into a place that's often jammed these days. So there is opportunities, but we need to pair the zoning with economic development and advertising and public relations so that we do get additional uses and complementary uses that create that kind of foot traffic.
And the thing, he has nothing to do. Right. You can't, it's not like dinner and a movie or something like that. We didn't even support that, not that he did himself any favors, but the golf simulator guy down the street.
We talk about it all the time. My son lives in Plymouth. You can go out almost 7 nights a week and see live.
Mhm.
On Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. You walk down Main Street and there's at least 9 to 10 restaurants. My son's in a band. I mean, every night. And they built out of an old church that was condemned. They did a big capital fundraising campaign and opened the Spire. And it's the most amazing music venue. You sit in the pews. But it is, the acoustics in there are incredible. They kept the stained glass windows, like, it's just a place, it's a destination for live music, and there's no place in Lynn to see a live band.
It's the auditorium.
Well, no, I mean, shows and stuff, I mean, that's amazing,
You're just
and we
like
go all the time, but
in a
to
restaurant.
go to dinner and hear a band,
Right, a little bit up in Wyoming Square, and that's the extent of it.
once in a while, Rollies and the Lazy Dog fit something in, but.
And just to throw a little sunshine on the issue. Okay? We've seen an increase in our walk-in business, okay? But it is the local residents, primarily Spanish-speaking residents that, need insurance, and we're one of the few left in the neighborhood, so they walk in, so we are sort of a destination spot, for that. And, when we bought the building 20 years ago, Central Square was a ghost town. And you had Omar and Sonia in the corner, and Raw Arts was really just starting, and that was it. It was, first time I showed up, there were people using my front door as a bathroom. So, it's come a long way, but we've always struggled with it. How do we get the people to come down that don't necessarily live in the neighborhood? And the other issue is, of course, a lot of people that live in the neighborhood don't have the disposable income to really drive, businesses to the next level, so.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, no, you.
Oh, just real quickly on that one, Glenn's point about zoning can only do too much is spot on. And to plug something community development's doing is they're looking at making some street and sidewalk improvements in Central Square. Because there's a public side of this too. You make investments to the building, make it look better. We need to make investments in the streets to make it look better and accessible,
I
so.
wiped out the other day on the bricks on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
No.
So hopefully,
Straight out. It's terrible
yeah,
in front of that.
yeah, so so pairing these investments with the zoning changes is trying to sort of make sure that we're addressing this issue.
And it's not really your wheelhouse, but in terms of what the city can do is you can manufacture destinations vis-a-vis festivals or even live music venues. There have been instances in Chelsea where I'm involved with the chamber as well, where they'll take a school parking lot, get some food trucks to show up, you get a band, some local businesses get booths, and you give them a destination in the summertime. It was a big thing when I used to live in Chicago for a few years anyway, and there was always a German festival or a Polish festival or a jazz festival or something going on that would draw people outside of the city into the city. Every weekend in the summer, there was something.
Well, we're working on one for the ferry terminal, that Donnie's spearheading, actually have a meeting down there today.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully
I
something.
didn't think I told the creature.
That's awesome, that's great.
Can I,
So, all
That's
right, one
my-
more question, because we'll wrap it up, and then I'm sure
Can I
they,
hear you talk about-
Aaron and Lauren will hang around and talk, but I have a Zoom meeting to be there.
Yeah. So just a statement, like one of the things so Michael Servo here from Incubate. I'm so psyched that the chamber is here in the space and it's downtown. Because a lot of the things that were just mentioned are all things that happen down here every week. There's concerts, there's comedy shows, Lucy Kay was here, like
I never heard about it.
every week. Lynn Music Foundation is right there,
Yeah, they're good.
right there.
I saw Russ
So
today.
the thing is that a lot of it is awareness.
Yeah, totally.
A lot of it is awareness and going out and supporting these things. So we don't actually make the effort to support what we do have that's budding. I don't think it's gonna start. So,
Well, if
I
you can
mean,
pump that information out to places, whether it's the chamber or,
Yeah.
even the councilors and.
But a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
mean,
these buildings,
now
they'll
that
have a
we're done.
screen up and with local events coming up or other weather, you know what I mean?
right, I mean, that's what I mean is like trying to make those inroads to those places where we can advertise and, one of the things that we can certainly work on. But it's like a lot of those things are budding and what happens is that they bud and die because they don't get support.
Yeah.
So like if we, have to start with like one or two venues at a time and then we can always.
It was
build.
kind of, before COVID, when Arts After Hours was next door, they were doing extremely well. A lot of great shows, and it was a lot of fun to come down here, but, COVID killed that. And
Right.
now it's trying to, the Phoenix try to rise from the ashes of that, but.
We had Thursday.
it's hard to pop in during Zoom, but like this is definitely my wheelhouse, and I'm glad Michael's there to advocate for Lynn Music Foundation. They are a small venue. They do shows 3 times a week, roughly, plus workshops, and they've been greatly supported by TDI. But I think when it comes to doing their film, they did a film festival. They've done music festivals. There's a lot of festivals out there, but it takes tens of thousands of dollars to pull these off. And without the sponsorship and support of the business community or having that funding, which we've been lucky enough to have that funding come through the city or through mass development, but to be sustainable, we need that interworking between the businesses that know they need the foot traffic and the creative community that needs the support of the businesses financially to be able to move forward with those things. So it's great to have these conversations in these rooms and to hear that, the local businesses acknowledge that this is helpful. So like when Michael comes to you to say, hey, how can you support the film festival? You're comfortable writing them a check to get it done. I know times are hard, but these kind of placemaking activities are expensive and everybody needs to be paid to be able to do them. And they're definitely out there, and Visit Lynn should be a really good resource for the calendar if people are submitting their calendar events and throwing that out to people, because it was specifically designed to market, things that are happening downtown in these development areas.
Thank you, Dave. Good point.
Right, can I just give a shout out to La Copa? The old
Oh,
pine
yeah.
fight, you know, have you been
I
able
gotta
to
get down there.
It's the old Pie and Pint right across from.
Oh, yeah,
Pharmacy.
it's good, yeah.
He came from the South Shore. I've been there 3 times in a month. Demis, Tejada.
Yeah.
Phenomenal chef, phenomenal person.
Yeah.
Phenomenal food. I'm talking prices reasonable. I mean, from burrito, it's Italian, Mexican.
Yeah.
And, I've had 3 different dishes from,
Oh,
salmon to steak. It's just phenomenal. So.
Yeah.
He'll come over to your table and
Get them in the chamber, we'll do a.
I told him, I don't think I talked to Ryan about that real briefly, but.
Then another one that a lot, I mention it, I go in there and they've been there for a little bit now. In Stone's Throw from here is First City Meats.
Oh, yeah.
The meat you get out of there is phenomenal.
Best burgers ever.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Get a nice fat ribeye, freshly cut. It's awesome. So Glenn, you're still with us. We are
I'm
still
still
on
with you.
for April 9th with Mayor McGee.
Yes, actually, the other Glenn Morris on the line right now is Mayor McGee. And he will be at our next meeting in April, talking about the MBTA and other subjects close to his heart.
Okay, look forward to that. Do you want to give us a preview there, Mr. Mayor?
Just great discussion this morning. Great to hear all of the comments across a broad range of topics. So look forward to having more discussions focused on the the opportunities in Lynn, and the support needed to make those things happen.
Yeah, fantastic. Look forward to it. All right,
Nice
everyone.
Nice job, Aaron and Lauren.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I'm sure if anyone has any questions, Aaron and Lauren entertain them.
Yes.
With that, thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next month.
We have a lot of things going
Hi,
on.
all.
One day, March 27th is our annual meeting, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Still available. And, just check out our website, lots of different things going on, we have a lot of programs out here downtown.
And Audrey, I'll get back to you today.
I gotta.
Thank you, Glenn.
You're welcome.
Nice to see you.
You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
Yeah.